There's a lot to be said about Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 3. Obviously spoilers ahead, literally from the very beginning of this video, so don't watch if you're not caught up. You've been warned. We've been waiting ages for the showdown between the living and the dead to see what will happen when Jon finally leads a fight against the Night King. There has literally been years and years of build-up of the White Walkers coming and the Night King's inevitable assault on the living, and when it finally gets here, he just kind of dies with a crafty stab to the gut. Now don't get me wrong, the episode was visually stunning, if you could see it. It was a lot of fumbling around in the dark, and it was suspenseful and dramatic, taking a bit of inspiration from Resident Evil. But for us geeky, die-hard, fan theory-loving fans, it was a massive letdown. He just died, and that was it. 8 years of walking less than 1 mile an hour through the snow to reach the land of the living. They finally get there, and that's it. Who was he? What was his exact purpose? Did he have any personal purpose? Was any purpose left from his days as a human? Why did the White Walkers wake up in the first place? What about the prophecy of the prince who was promised, which Melisandre wouldn't shut up about for 6 whole seasons? Now, we haven't reached the end of the final series yet. At the time of making this video, there's still some glimmer of hope of potential catharsis, of maybe finding out a bit more. So in the beginning, Bran saw in a vision that the children of the forest created the White Walkers because they were getting persecuted and killed by the first men, so they used their magic to create an evil to defend themselves. We never find out who this man is. He could be a Stark, which is what most series say. Since Starks are descended from the first men, they would have been around at the time, and they're closest to the far north and have some affiliation with the weirwood trees and the old gods. He could also be a stranger, a random which the children nabbed off a forest trail and turned into the most evil character in Game of Thrones, although there's some competition on that. But it's unlikely he's just a random. One of the things George R.R. Martin is known for is giving proper motivations to his characters and maintaining a moral ambiguity in them, in that no one is totally good or totally evil. The Night King, even though we know pretty much nothing about him, is one of the key characters in Game of Thrones. The entire series opens with a White Walker undead scene, and the impending doom of the living at the hands of the dead has foreshadowed all of the squabbles and wars in the whole world of Game of Thrones. So given what we know about George Martin's habits when it comes to character creation, it's highly unlikely that the Night King is just a one-dimensional bad guy whose sole purpose was to destroy humanity without much reasoning at all. Bran said that he's going to come for him, the Three-Eyed Raven, first, because the Three-Eyed Raven is the world's memories, which everyone heard and just kind of went, oh, alright then, as if they'd known all along what a Three-Eyed Raven is and who Bran was destined to be. So clearly, the Night King has some sense and some form of thinking, so he can't just be a big, dumb bad guy. You can see it when he launches his javelin and then resurrects Viserion, or when he gives Dany a smug smile after he was completely unharmed by Drogon's flames. Speaking of which, why was he unaffected by dragonfire? Dragonfire is shown to be the hottest element going, far more potent than normal fire, since dragonfire can melt stone and steel, like when Aegon's dragon Balerion the Dread melted the fortress of Harrenhal, or how he forged the Iron Throne out of hundreds of steel swords. So why was the Night King unaffected? The only thing we know is unaffected by dragonfire is a dragon itself, or those with dragon's blood, like Daenerys. Since Jon is half Targaryen, does that mean he'll also be unaffected by dragonfire? Or maybe he'll be half affected and be like Two-Face if he ever tries? Because the Night King was unaffected, could he be part Targaryen? Is this why he could ride Viserion? Since only those with Targaryen blood, namely Jon and Dany, have ever been able to ride dragons. Maybe the Night King could be like Jon, since he is ice and somehow immune to fire. Could he be part Stark and part Targaryen? Like Jon is both fire and ice, both dragon and wolf, the embodiment of joining of ice and fire. It could also be because ice and fire are two opposing elements, and since dragons are magic, like this freak pointed out in season 2, and embody the element of fire, the Night King is magic and embodies the element of ice. Do they cancel each other out? Perhaps. Another thing George Martin is known for, alongside his moral ambiguity and character complexity, is never really leaving anything straightforward. You can see this in Jon's parentage, in the lies surrounding Robert's rebellion, in the connection between the past and the present when Hodor becomes Hodor and also dies Hodor, when Jaime reveals exactly why he slayed the Mad King and how he saved King's Landing from a hell of wildfire. Nothing is straightforward. So how can the Night King just rock up to Winterfell after 8 years of build-up and be killed with a single stab and nothing else behind his character, origin or motivations? Is this truly it? Is it because the show's source material finished at season 5? Or maybe there's more? Or rather, I'm sorely hoping and dying for there to be more. Back in season 6, when Bran was training with the Three-Eyed Raven, the Raven and the show stressed a couple of points about Bran's ability over and over again. That you can't stay in the past for too long, presumably because if you do, you cannot come back to the present, and that Bran looking into the past can affect what happens in the present, like when he called out to Ned, and obviously when he walked into Hodor, turning Hodor into Hodor. Hodor. This point hasn't been seen since, but the show went to great lengths to stress it. Could this be something of relevance? There's this theory that the voices the Mad King heard, whispering to him burn them all, was in fact Bran, telling him to burn the dead, but the Mad King went mad, hearing voices and misinterpreting them to burn all the living. Could this have relevance to the connection between Bran and the Night King? There's a popular theory that Bran is the Night King, that Bran could have walked into the man that the children turned in order to convince them not to create him, and then Bran got stuck in his conscious because he was there for too long. Bran and the Night King looked at each other for a little while before he was vanquished. Was there any warging going on? Did Bran see himself in the Night King? Did the Night King warg into him? Maybe Bran and the Night King are one and the same person, and Bran came back to Winterfell in his Night King form to stop himself from warging back into the Night King before he was created, in order to end the time loop and stop the Night King from existing at all. Maybe the Night King is Bran, and Bran is both a good and a bad guy in a single form, both the entire memories of humanity and also its doom. And if that was the case, it would fit nicely with George Martin's storytelling style. And if this was the case, the prophecy of Azor Ahai, the prince or princess who was promised, may also hold up. The prophecy, which Melisandre went on and on about but never actually explained, prophesies a prince or princess would be the embodiment of fire and ice, and would only be able to defeat the ultimate evil with a sword called Lightbringer, which can only be forged by plunging it into the heart of their beloved, into a heart of fire. Interpreting from the current Game of Thrones scenario, this would suggest that Jon, being the embodiment of both ice and fire, both Stark and Targaryen, both direwolf and dragon, would need to plunge his sword into Daenerys' heart, the heart of his beloved, a heart of fire, in order to forge Lightbringer to kill the Night King, who also happens to be his brother. Or at least, this story wears up a lot better with the prophecies, the storytelling style, what we've heard and seen for 8 years, rather than just a crafty and well-placed stab which brought the Night King down. And it has so much more poeticism to it. We have 3 more episodes to go at the time I'm making this video, so maybe there is more to the story, and I'm really hoping there's more. After so many years of densely packed, heavily layered, morally ambiguous and beautifully and intoxicatingly intricately woven storyline, surely it can't all end with a whimper. I'm really hoping they go somewhere else with this and actually use at least some of the amazing content and storyline they've built around this. Also, as a side note, just before I wrap up, I find it amazing how much we're all so into this. It's a story, and the human is a storytelling animal, but we connect so many emotions to it, so much connection, even though we know it's pure fantasy. It tells me about the nature of belief in the human, about how religion, prophecy, personal effort and meaning play a huge part in our lives, and who we are as individuals and as a race. But anyway, that's for another video. For now, let's hope GOT has a bit more to offer in the final episodes.